This is Twisted Passages with award-winning author Marie Sutro. Now, let's take a deep dive into the dark world of psychological thrillers and meet the authors who created them.
Hello, and welcome to Twisted Passages. I'm your host, Marie Sutro, and today we have Sunday Times and internationally best-selling author Sarah Vaughan here to talk about her new release based on a true story. Welcome, Sarah.
What a great intro. Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
Oh, I am so excited to have you here. This book had me from the start and did not let go. But before I start ranting about it, can you start listeners off with an overview of what the story is about?
Okay, so based on a true story, it's a psychological drama about power, money, lies, and family narratives, which starts with a body on a storm-lashed North Cornwall beach. Famous children's author Dame Eleanor Kingman has gathered together her family and friends to celebrate her 70th birthday party and her latest #1 bestseller. But someone's been sending her emails threatening to expose the lies she's kept for half a century. She's got a TV crew arriving to film a documentary of her life, which she assumes is going to be glowing. But can she discover her nemesis and preserve the fiction on which her identity and multi-million-pound career depends? So that's the sort of setup.
Can we just start with what you mentioned, the waves that are lashing against the shore? I mean, this setting is phenomenal. Can you explain a little bit about how you got the idea? I think from what I've read, you have some familiarity with this area, but the house, the property, everything.
Yeah, so it's set in North Cornwall, which is probably the area in the world that I feel the most affinity with. I was brought up in Devon, which is the county next to it where Agatha Christie had her sort of home on the cliffs once she'd started to earn lots of money. But Cornwall is it's a peninsula. It's obviously off the edge of the country, and it's a bit wilder. It's very elemental down there. You can get four types of weather in an hour, really. I've stood in a field on a Cornish cliff where there's been a brilliant sunshine and a rainbow on one side of the field and tempestuous rain and thunderstorms on the other. You know, it is that sort of mercurial and changeable. And it's an area of intense beauty and quite a lot of drama, quite a lot of geography that lends itself to suspense. So you've got high cliffs, you've got tides which carry away evidence, you've got terrible phone reception. So that helps, these days, because actually people can't get a mobile phone signal there. And you've got this weather that sort of acts as a sort of pathetic fallacy and a sense of isolation and a sense of morals could be slightly different down there somewhat, that you're slightly cut off from the rest of the country. I wrote about that in my second novel, which isn't published in the States, but on which I drew on sort of Du Maurier and deliberately went and got lost on Bodmin Moor where there was Mizzle coming down to really sort of play with those elements. It's an area I really love. Dame Eleanor Kingman has come from nothing, but she has all the sort of signifiers of success now. And one of them is that she likes accruing property. So her latest property acquisition is a manor house that she's just bought from the Cornish cliff. So it's a beautiful sort of 17th century granite stone. It's got manicured lawns, but then you've got a heath before the coast path. She's got an unobscured view of the sea. And the property is sort of sorry, that's the dog that fits with the thing. The property fits, has tennis courts and has signifiers of wealth, but also is quite wild. So to research that bit, I just went on Rightmove website where you can put in the price of, I wanted it, it's 4.25 million. So it's a rather nice pile that she's got. And there's quite a strong literary heritage of writers writing down there. So David Cornwall, John le Carre lived down there. Du Maurier obviously has written about it in Rebecca and Frenchman's Creek, and although she's South Cornwall, and obviously Agatha Christie wrote, and then there was none in sort of neighbouring Devon, but that idea of characters coming away from London to a very remote area is kind of quite crime fiction.
And it's so fun because not only is this setting epic and larger than life, but you've given us a character in Dame Eleanor that fits right in with all of those literary icons that you just mentioned. And Eleanor is everything she needs to be and then some.
That's such a lovely thing to say, because I've been quite surprised. Some people have said, she's really narcissistic and they've wanted a very likable character. But what I was interested in doing was actually creating an older woman. So she's 70. I'd never written a character that old before. Oh, that's not true, actually. I had in my second novel, but not one main character like that. And I like writing about strong female protagonists. So in Anatomy of a Scandal, which is kind of my most successful book, I've got a female barrister. Little Disasters, which has just been a TV show as well, I've got a paediatrician. And in Reputation, the book after that, I've got a female MP. So I like writing strong, interesting women. And I thought, if I had a character who was 70 and was very successful, was wealthier than the characters I've created before, she's actually going to be quite hard-nosed and quite ruthless. If she's smashed some glass ceilings, she is not necessarily going to be this likable old lady. She's not an old lady. I don't think 70-year-olds think of themselves as old ladies at all. My mother certainly doesn't. So I wanted to create somebody who had some sharp edges, because I think that it's the flawed characters that are always the most interesting.
Like every good writer, you gave us all the layers of the onion. Every human being has different sides to them. As we learn about her, and really with all of these characters, everyone kind of has a backstory. Everyone has a place they're coming from. It really foretells who they are and where they are today. And I absolutely loved that, because I couldn't get enough of the different nuances that you folded into conversations, into actual scenes. It was so much fun. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about that was done so well in this was the concept of generational trauma. Oh, yeah. And I that was so beautifully handled and so deftly handled in this. You've got Eleanor and you've got all of her 3 daughters there, and the dynamics are absolutely terrifying sometimes.
Well, I am an eldest daughter of an eldest daughter of an eldest daughter. In fact, I'm an eldest granddaughter of an eldest granddaughter of an eldest granddaughter, I think. And I keep saying, Eleanor is not my mother, and my younger sister, who's a primary school teacher, is definitely not Delia. In fact, the book is dedicated to her, and she read it before I submitted it, because I was really concerned that people didn't think it. She's lovely. I'm probably more the difficult daughter, I should think. But I do think as you get older, and we're all much more attuned to, I've had some therapy, and we're all much more aware, aren't we, of how the past informs us, really. I'm a mother now. My kids are just becoming young adults. I think in the act of mothering, you think about how you were mothered and how your mother was mothered, and we see this all the way through. And I think you only have to go on Instagram to believe that everybody's got generational trauma. So I think we are all shaped by our paths, aren't we? In fact, there's a whole chapter where Eleanor talks about that, and talks about authors who've talked about, the past is a different country, but it's not really, is it? Because, that is actually who we are. And I was really fascinated by that idea of family narratives, about how we all have I have a very different recollection of parts of my childhood than my sister does. And certainly events like, when my parents divorced and things, I suppose that was, the harshest bit of my childhood. And I was very bullied actually at school. So yeah, there are things. But, one's different instances are different according to where you come in the birth order and how old you are at the time, aren't they? So I was really interested in teasing that out. The two in this book, the 2 elder sisters are 38 and 40, and their mother has then, I flipped the sort of, it's a feminized King Lear, but I think we can say this. I've sort of flipped the idea, so they're not Goneril and Regan, they're Gilly and Rachel, but they're the good older daughters who very much want to support their mother, partly because they want to financially benefit. And the younger daughter, who is younger by about 8 years, she's had a very different childhood, because she has been her mother's muse, and her mother has then become incredibly successful. So she has had a childhood where she's been brought up on the banks of the Thames in a large house with tennis courts, and she has been adored and spoiled in a way that her older sisters, who lived in a 3-bedroom semi-detached house, haven't. So she's had a level of wealth that they haven't, but the payback has been that she's always been preserved as this sort of little 8-year-old prepubescent child, and she never feels she can kind of escape that, and she's kicking and railing against it. So Delia talks about trauma, but she's an Instagram influencer in her posts. she's also benefited from this. You know, she's spoiled. I don't think we're meant to view Delia in an uncritical way. And right at the end, we get Eleanor thinking, well, you know, you want to talk about childhood trauma, you should try my childhood type thing, you know. So I think it's all relative, isn't it? But yeah, I was really interested in exploring that idea. We're all so much more emotionally articulate, and we understand the grammar, don't we, of things like that now. So I'm assuming that my readers do. So I thought that was really worth going into.
It was fantastic. And these characters are so approachable for everyone because all of these issues resonate with all of us. There is this dynamic that as parents age, whether it's a new job, hey, whether it's your car, you buy a new car, the first scratch is the worst, right? A couple of years in, hey, oh, there's another dent. Okay, fine. And unfortunately, while the youngest kids usually benefit financially because parents are better established, younger ones come along, they also kind of hurt from that attitude that parents have of, oh, it's just another dent, it's fine. You know? So there's so much to be said about that. And I think anyone who's lived for a minute on this earth can totally identify with all of these characters and get so much out of them. And I will say that brings up the whole issue, and I don't want to give spoilers, and we won't do that, but there is a fantastic subplot running through this.
Good.
And oh my goodness, in exactly what you were just talking about, how she's not necessarily willing to look at other people's situations with as much empathy or even sympathy as one might expect her to, given whoever it is in her life, whether it's her agent or whether it's her child, whoever it is. And as I said, this one particular subplot is a situation where she stands out for all of Is that Olive?
Sorry, we'll have to explain that later.
That's okay, no worries.
So you're talking about the Tom subplot?
I'm talking about the Tom subplot. And like I said, I don't want to give spoilers, but it is so propulsive. The story itself is absolutely amazing. The mainline plot story, but that subplot just adds this other layer. And really, I was so reminded, Sarah, for both of those, the main plot and then that subplot, I was reminded of the old, I don't know if you ever saw the show, the original Mission Impossible, where it had the little line that's burning and you know that it's going to keep going, it's going to blow up. Oh my God, time is running out. You had a time clock on this that just had me on the edge of my seat. Oh,
that's brilliant, because it's actually only when I finished writing it that I thought, actually, I have got a ticking clock. I have got a device of a ticking clock, because there is an imperative. I mean, I think I can give a bit of a spoiler about this, can I, or not? So I think I will. Okay. Tom owes some money, and the money is actually going to increase. And so he, you know, unless he gets it by a certain point. And he is also being, he's driving down to Cornwall, and he fears he's being followed, and we don't know if he is being followed, but it's pretty clear that something is happening. So there is a chase, and there is a ticking clock that's going on there. So you've got two levels of threat there, which is separate to the threat that's probably not as immediate, that is that does increase, which is that something is going to happen at this party, which is, we start off, I think, on the Thursday morning, and the party's the Saturday night, and we know that there are emails which increase in frequency and become more threatening, and we wonder if something is going to erupt. And of course, something does erupt on the Saturday night at this beautiful glittery party. So there are two, and Tom sort of existed partly because I very much wanted to write more of I call it a sort of Christie for the Instagram age, but a puzzle that can be resolved with lots of red herrings, in the same way that, you know, and then there were none. And of course I'm not saying it's as good as that, but you know, and then there were none. There are lots of animuses and lots of backstories and lots of guilty things going on there. I mean, they all get killed off. That doesn't happen here. But you know, in the same way that the White Lotus starts with the body, and then you don't know whose the body is, and you don't know why they've been killed, and you don't know how they've been killed, and you then spend how many episodes getting to that point. I wanted to start with that. So I start with the body on the beach, and I had lots of sort of, hopefully, red herrings, people with animuses, and this subplot of Tom really getting quite a lot of trouble. And that was great fun, actually, to write these sort of more menacing characters and to research quite how he's got him, because I discovered actually it would be quite easy to get yourself into his situation, and he has no way of getting out of it. And precisely because Eleanor does not believe in people being fallible, and she has had to be a complete toughie, and so she doesn't exhibit that sympathy and that empathy, as you say, for people making mistakes like that. She's very hard-nosed about that.
In my experience, this is a generational difference as well, that prior generations didn't talk about things, and you did keep it under the rug. And that was, I think, for our generation, something that we were expected to do. But in our generation, there was a transition against that. And certainly for the new generations, that's just, you just don't do that. Why would you do that? That's going to hurt people, and you're going to hurt yourself. So oh my gosh, those generational plays too were so good, especially Delia on one end, Eleanor on the other. I think the best part about it, and why it's also approachable, and why it's such a good story, is because we root for every single person, except for maybe the folks coming after Tom. I don't know that they're redeemable, but I'm sure, Sarah, if you shared their backstory, we would start to root for them too. But it's interesting because people who are edgy or have barbs or any of these things, you make us look for the humanity, and you show us glimpses just enough to make us want to crack open the shell and say, who are you really? Come on, I know there's good in there.
That is such a lovely thing to say. That's what I try and do, I guess. I mean, I'm just writing a piece actually for Crime Reads about Shakespeare and what it can teach us about suspense, because obviously there's Macbeth and Lear in here, and he's obviously really interested in tragic heroes who have this sort of fatal flaw. So in Lear, which is this is very, very loosely based on it, but if you know your Lear, you might see a few Easter eggs that kind of might explain things later on. Obviously Lear is proud and autocratic, and he's like a spoilt child wanting his daughters to tell him how much he loves them, and Eleanor isn't that bad, but she is authoritarian, and she's very controlling, and that is her fatal flaw. She hasn't really allowed her daughters to become adults. The older two, she's not really paying them enough. She treats her first daughter, Jilly, who's her sort of right-hand woman, she's had to kind of give up her life. Oh, well, she hasn't quite, has she? But she's going to rebel a little bit. But she has sort of completely put her mother's needs before hers. Rachel, in the same way, has been her accountant, earning less than she should be, and her younger daughter is part of the whole literary heritage. And Eleanor is very flawed like that. But I find that really fascinating, and I think all crime fiction really, and certainly psychological thrillers, and I would say this is more like a psychological drama, but what they're interested in is the disconnect between appearance and reality, which you very much get when you have a glossy setting in a beautiful house and a party where everything seems to be fine. But actually, perfect people, A, they don't exist in real life, but B, they're boring. So what's fascinating, I think, is why people are flawed. What's not just the need and the want, but the childhood wound that is causing Eleanor to have to be so controlling about everything. I obviously do sound like I've been reading lots of therapy, but I think we are much more emotionally literate, aren't we, as you say, our generation than older generations. My mum, she's 80, but she is very emotionally literate, but she often says she was brought up by Edwardians. So that's actually, her mother was born in 1913 or something. So you think about the societal change. That as my mother's a boomer, born in 46. I wanted Eleanor to be 18 in 1969, when the men landed on the moon. I think there's such societal change and such societal growth from the Second World War to now, compared to what their parents experienced. So they're all interesting things to explore. What interesting questions. I hadn't realized that's really what I was writing about.
Well, it was so much fun, and just kind of dovetailing on what you said, I remember when I was in school and I learned about women getting the right to vote. I knew my grandmothers, and I thought, oh my God, these ladies were born in a world where they couldn't vote. And it shook me to the core, because I always thought, well, those were things so far in the past but they're not. And truly, even our generation was very transformational in terms of firsts for women. And it's still going on. Women are still trying to quite get their footing. And it really is an amazing thing when you think of these timeframes and you think of just how much psychology has grown, and our ability to empathize and our ability to be open to others.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I would say as well that although Eleanor has, she's 18 in 1969, but she has still had to battle, the expectation in the 80s was that, was still expected to be fitting her career around her children, which I have done to an extent. But when I started, I was a journalist, but it became impossible for me to continue being a news reporter with two small children, and I had a sort of pregnancy complication as well, and childcare and the hours of doing that, so I actually reinvented myself as a author, because that was something, my husband's a hospital doctor, it fitted around one of us being around for children. So I don't know how we ever get, hopefully my daughter's generation, it'll be easier for her, but I don't know, I think we need to have some massive societal shifts for that to be the case, really. So I wanted to explore for women of that generation. They've made huge bounds, but they've also had sort of restrictions.
Well, I can just say that I, for one, am so very glad that you transitioned to becoming an author, because your stories are phenomenal, and they're so thought-provoking. They're so emotionally engaging. And I am very glad that you made the transition.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad too.
One of the characters we didn't talk about is Edith. She is amazing. Yes. She is pivotal. She is everything. I can totally see her face, but I understand the third attendee in this particular interview, Olive, is a big inspiration for her. Now, is Olive a spaniel too?
Yes, she's a cockapoo, but she's much more spaniel-y than poodle-y, if you sort of mean. So I'm sorry, she was barking earlier. It's very hot, and we're having this. It's lovely, but it is slightly freakish, and we're not equipped for it over here. A big heat wave, and so she is absolutely. She's black as well. So I really would like a golden spaniel. Edith, it's a line I cut out, and I wish I hadn't, but the paragraph, the sentence was getting too long. But she was named after E. Nesbit, and also in the Enid Blyton Secret 7 books, they have a cocker spaniel, golden. They're called golden spaniels, aren't they? Called Scamper. So she was like in my head, But I have to say, so my Olive is 9, and I have become that. My kids are now 21 and 18, and I have become that cliched middle-aged lady whose dog is kind of her surrogate child, really, at the moment. So she was a big inspiration. Yeah,
I was so impressed with Olive's promo skills, because I am sure your publicists are going to adore hearing this interview, because you're talking about just how intense things are for the characters, and then there was this perfect little whine, like, oh no, what's gonna happen? Perfectly choreographed.
I would love to say she was that intelligent. I don't think she is particularly intelligent, although she can be quite stubborn, and it's quite lonely being at home writing. So she is my little friend. Sounds pathetic, but she is my little shadow.
Well, we are all so very grateful as readers that at least we got the Edith version of Olive.
At least got the Edith, but she is lovely.
Well, speaking of all of us fans and all of the new fans who will be finding you, where is the best place for people to go to find out what's next?
Yeah, I do have a website. So that is www.sarahvaughanauthor.com. I'm quite active on Instagram at @svaughanauthor. I really love seeing what readers are reading there.
Perfect. And I cannot say enough about how very perfect Based on a True Story is. It is atmospheric in all of the great Gothic ways. There are great characters. It is propulsive. And it makes you get all the feels. It is amazing.
That's a perfect review. Thank you so much. And I really love doing this.
You are welcome, Sarah. I've loved having you. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Twisted Passages. We hope to see you next time.